The novel revolves around the complex lives of individuals entangled in a world where werewolves exist alongside humans, exploring themes of love, survival, and the struggle for normalcy amidst extraordinary circumstances. Abigail, a young woman, narrates her harrowing experience of being betrayed by her ex-boyfriend, who promised her a life together if she became a werewolf like him. Instead, she finds herself trapped in a polygamous arrangement with him and his 6 other wives. Traumatized, she escapes to a sanctuary run by Scott, a rugged yet compassionate figure with a unique lumberjack meets hipster style. There she meets Riley, a practical and resilient woman adjusting to her own werewolf transformation, grappling with the long-term implications on her humanity and motherhood. Riley, a mother to Ryan, a young werewolf child who struggles with speech and prefers his wolf form, serves as a mentor figure to Abigail, assuring her safety and assistance. Riley's own journey is marred by guilt, and the knowledge that she won't easily reintegrate into human society. She copes with raising Ryan, who embodies the conflict between their dual natures, while also managing her complicated feelings towards Elijah, a man who brings both intimacy and a sense of belonging into her life. The story further delves into the dynamics of a community hidden away from the rest of the world, where werewolf children like Jacob and his siblings navigate playtime and chores, hinting at the challenges and joys of their unique existence. The farmstead, a haven for those affected by lycanthropy, becomes a backdrop for healing and self-discovery, as characters confront their pasts and futures. The narrative intertwines themes of loyalty, sacrifice, and the search for identity within the context of supernatural elements. It also touches upon the idea of fate and mating, as the wolf within Riley craves a bond with Elijah beyond societal norms, desiring to build a family and continue their lineage. Ultimately, the novel is a tale of resilience and adaptation, showcasing characters' ability to find solace and strength amidst the chaos of their transformed lives, while also hinting at the potential for redemption and the possibility of love transcending conventional boundaries. Chapter 1. He said that if I became a werewolf then we could be together, Abigail sobbed, tears running down her pale freckled cheeks. But after he bit me, he took me to his compound, where I met his 6 other wives. Her words became incomprehensible as she broke down, sobbing about her ex-boyfriend's atrocities. She looked tiny in the large leather armchair, surrounded by cheap junk store furniture and faded throw rugs. Abigail's wispy blonde hair was a mess, and there were several scratches up her thin legs. Her short pink dress looked like it belonged in a club, and her heels were covered in dirt. Riley crossed her legs. The old metal chair groaned under her weight. Unlike Abigail, Riley was dressed more practically in a pair of worn jeans and a gray sweater. Her long black hair was pulled back, and her face was bare without a hint of makeup. There were faint lines around her dark eyes which made her look older. Riley blamed it on stress. Abigail paused to gasp for breath. And then he wanted me to have sex with him. And this other woman, she sobbed. But she was actually his cousin. And they wanted me to have their babies. Scott coughed to clear his throat, trying to keep his face neutral. He crossed his arms and leaned back against his battered desk. His style was a cross between lumberjack and hipster. He was wearing thick black glasses and a red checkered shirt. Long blonde hair flowed freely down his shoulders. What matters is you're here now. Scott passed Abigail a towel. You're in a safe place and we can get you the help that you need. Abigail nodded while wiping tears from her face. Right, Riley, said Scott. Yes. Riley tried to put on a reassuring smile. Yes, of course. You never have to worry about that stupid guy again. You can stay here tonight, said Scott. Then in the morning we'll get you some medication. Things may be hard now, but you'll be back to normal before long. Abigail's lower lip trembled. Scott barely had any warning before the young woman launched herself at him, embracing Scott in a tight hug. Thank you, Abigail cried, resting her face against his neck. Her short dress slipped up to unveil her lace underwear. You're the nicest guy that I've ever met. Riley rolled her eyes. Abigail had been through a lot, but Riley was certain that the young woman was only using the hug as an excuse to get a whiff of Scott's scent. It wasn't unusual for werewolves. If Scott wasn't careful, Abigail could end up getting too attached. I have some clothes that you can wear, Abigail, said Riley. We could go pick them up now, right, Scott? Yeah, sure. Scott gave Abigail an awkward pat on the back before gently pushing her away. You're leaving me? Abigail whined, lower lip trembling like she was going to burst into tears again. We'll be back soon, said Scott. Bathroom's in the back. Why don't you go? Take a shower while you wait. Okay. Abigail lowered her head. Don't worry, said Scott. We won't abandon you. Abigail launched herself at Scott again, sobbing against his shirt. I was so scared, she wailed like a small child. Scott patted her back while trying to pry her shaking fingers from his forearms. Despite Abigail's scantily clad outfit, she was just a vulnerable young woman. No different to the other people they had helped over the years. Riley decided to give them a moment alone. She walked through Scott's house to his truck. Scott had leased the property to help people who were dealing with their werewolf transformations. The house was an old 5-bedroom vacation home. It hadn't been renovated in years, so the door hinges had rusted and the wallpaper was turning yellow. Nobody seemed to mind because they didn't stay long. Scott emerged out the front door a few minutes later. His shirt was covered in several damp patches and hints of snot. Thanks for your help, he said. Having you there really encouraged her to open up. But I barely did anything, said Riley. But I think having another woman there really put her at ease. Scott unlocked his truck and slipped in behind the driver's wheel. A lot of girls like her have trouble trusting men. Riley opened the door and sat down in the passenger seat. But she didn't seem to have any problems, Riley thought. She didn't hesitate to throw herself all over you like you were her next meal. Scott started the engine and pulled out onto the road. I'll probably stop by to pick up some dinner on the way back. You're welcome to come too if you want. I should really get back. Riley tapped her fingers against the window. Trissy's been bugging me not to stay out too late. Still obsessing over everything? You have no idea, Riley groaned. Sometimes she treats me like I'm one of her children. Scott let out a quiet chuckle, causing Riley to roll her eyes. She glanced out the window to watch the scenery speed past. When Riley imagined living by the sea, she thought of palm trees and pristine white beaches, but East Cove was nothing like that. Overlooked by most tourists, it was a small coastal town with gray skies and freezing cold water. It was full of cheaply built holiday homes and people who were looking for a quiet place to retire or hide. It was perfect for someone like Riley. 5 years earlier, Riley was bitten by a werewolf while traveling alone. Luckily, she was helped by a young woman named Wanda, but the cult Wanda introduced Riley to was far from a barrel of fun. It was nothing more than a setup to encourage young werewolves to breed with each other, allowing them to shamelessly screw all over the halls and forest. It was too much for Riley. She didn't last more than a few weeks. Luckily, Wanda introduced her to Scott, who was kind enough to save her from that madhouse. He introduced Riley to a new way of living which suited her much better. She had finally regained some semblance of a human life. Riley tapped her fingers against the truck window. Have you heard anything from Wanda? Scott shook his head. No, but she often goes dark when she starts things up with a new guy. You know what werewolves are like. They don't tend to update their status online. Riley bit her lip. She knew that Scott was probably right, but that didn't stop her from worrying. You don't think that anything could have happened to her? I doubt it. Wanda's pretty good at looking after herself and she's got plenty of people watching her back. But still, Wanda's spent her whole life around werewolves. She knows how to work the system better than you think. Yeah, I suppose. Riley tried to push her concerns to the back of her mind. Wanda helped Riley the most after she first turned into a werewolf. Riley still felt like she owed the other woman a great debt. Scott turned onto a narrow dirt road. Untamed bushes and tree branches scratched the sides of the vehicle. After several winding turns, they pulled up before an old farmstead. The large house had been built 60 years earlier. White paint was peeling from the wooden boards, and there were several tiles missing from the roof. It was surrounded by overgrown fields and dark forests. Several goats roamed free in a paddock, and there was a small vegetable garden. A group of children and wolves were playing outside, chasing each other in circles. One boy bounded towards them in wolf form, seamlessly transforming into a human mid-jump. It was Trissy's son Jacob. The 10-year-old was tall for his age with freckled skin and flaming red hair. What's she like? Jacob asked with boundless enthusiasm. Is she nice? Is she gonna come live with us? Scott reached out to ruffle Jacob's hair. It's too early to say. Abigail might want to get back to her family soon. I hope that she comes here. Jacob smiled. Then we'd have someone else to help with the chores. Mama's always complaining that the house is a mess. Aren't there already enough of you here? Said Scott. You might have to give up your bed. There's plenty of space in the shed, said Jacob. Except when Vanessa brings her friends over. They're always super loud and screaming and dash. Okay, coughed Scott. I'll let you know what Abigail thinks. Jacob's face broke out into a giant grin. He spun on his heels and transformed back into a brown wolf, rejoining the game. Despite Jacob's enthusiasm, Riley highly doubted that Abigail would stick around for long. Abigail had at least been smart enough to get an ID before the crazy wolf fucking began. Scott would hook Abigail up with some decent meds, then she'd be back clubbing in the city with her besties within a few weeks. Riley was an entirely different story. It would be years before she could return to regular human society. Running amongst the children was a smaller wolf pup with jet black fur. He caught sight of Riley and bounded towards her. He transformed into a small child with pale skin, black hair and piercing blue eyes. He attached himself to Riley's leg, hugging her tightly. Hey Ryan, Riley said with a smile, running her fingers through his soft, dark hair. Did you miss me? Ryan silently looked up at her with his wide eyes. He gave Riley a small smile before running off to rejoin the game. Still not talking? Asked Scott. No, said Riley, failing to suppress a familiar sense of guilt. Nothing that really sounds like a word anyway. It's okay, said Scott. Some kids just take longer than others. Yeah, I know, said Riley, even though she didn't believe him. Her son was 4. He should be talking already. Instead he just made animal-like growls and exaggerated hand gestures. Riley often thought of taking him to a doctor, but Ryan was still too unpredictable. He preferred being a wolf more than human, and it was difficult to make him wear clothes. He didn't seem to understand that people outside the farmstead wouldn't take kindly to werewolves. Ryan was Riley's souvenir from her time in a werewolf cult. Before becoming a werewolf, Riley was meticulously careful about birth control, but that was all thrown out the window once a wild animal was shoved into her skull. Her inner wolf only wanted to screw as much as possible, obsessed with getting knocked up and pumping out babies in the spring. Riley was too immersed in a sex-induced haze to worry about the consequences of her love-making with Ryan's father. Riley tore her eyes away from her son. I'll just go grab those clothes for Abigail. Okay, said Scott. I'll wait out here. Riley walked up to the battered front door and entered the house. The interior hadn't been renovated since they started renting the place. Stank of cigarette smoke and the floors were littered with children's toys. Riley had only taken several steps when Trissy suddenly appeared. Trissy was only in her mid-30s, but raising 7 children had taken its toll on her health. Her face was lined with wrinkles and her curly brown hair was streaked with gray. She was dressed in a frumpy t-shirt and jeans stained with paint. You forgot to do the dishes again, she said robotically, like she was too exhausted to show an ounce of emotion. I'm sorry, said Riley. Scott needed my help with some things. Do them, Trissy said. Do them soon. It's not fair on the rest of us if you keep letting your chores slide. I'll do it in a moment, said Riley. I just need to give Scott some things. Trissy stared into space for a moment as though caught in a daze. She was snapped out of it by her twin sons fighting in front of the TV. Change it. Trissy's 5-year-old son Michael screamed at his brother while trying to rip the remote out of the other boy's hand. No. Thomas yelled back and kicked his brother in the stomach. It's mine. Give it to me. No. It's mine. No. Mom. Just stop it. Trissy moaned and went to stop the fighting. If you can't work it out amongst yourselves, then I'm taking the T.V away. Riley slipped into her room. She shared it with Ryan, so several of his paintings and drawings were pinned to the walls. The floor was covered in plastic cars and trucks. Riley and Ryan each had their own beds, but they shared the wardrobe and chest of drawers. Riley went through the wardrobe in search of anything that she didn't need. She pulled out several old shirts and 2 pairs of jeans. She slipped them into a plastic bag, then went outside to meet Scott. Scott had immersed himself in a game of tag, chasing the kids around while making exaggerated monster sounds. Scotty Wolf is looking for dinner, Scott growled in a low voice while waving his arms in the air. Wolf, 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 the children chanted together. Scott reached for his shirt to pull it over his head, but then looked up to See Riley standing there. Maybe next time, guys. He pried a small child from his arm and walked over to Riley. Here. Riley handed him the clothes. I don't know what Abigail likes, but hopefully they fit. Thanks, said Scott. I'm sure she'll appreciate it. Let me know if you need help with anything else. I should be okay. I'll give you a call if anything comes up. I can stop by after my shift tomorrow. Riley nervously shifted her weight. Check in to see how she's doing. Really? Scott smiled. That would be great. Dishes. Trissy yelled out from inside. Riley cringed. Better let you go, Scott chuckled. Wouldn't want to keep Mother waiting. Please, Riley huffed. She's barely old enough to be my mother. Scott backed away towards his truck. I'll pick you up from work tomorrow. Sounds good. Riley waved goodbye. Catch you then. Scott got in his truck and started the engine, slowly reversing back onto the road. Riley went straight to the kitchen, horrified by the massive pile of dirty dishes sitting in the sink. It had only been a day, but with so many people in the house they quickly stacked up. Trissy wouldn't be able to serve dinner until Riley finished cleaning at least half. She sighed and turned on the tap, slowly washing the plates and glasses one by one. The screams of the children playing outside wafted in from the open kitchen door. Ryan was being chased by Trissy's youngest daughter Andrea, a bright, energetic toddler who hadn't inherited the werewolf gene. Andrea still hadn't worked out that she was never going to turn into a wolf. She spent most of her days following her older siblings around while making growling noises. As a child born from werewolves, she was also immune from werewolf bites. She'd never become a werewolf even if her siblings gnawed on her all day. Riley considered Andrea lucky. The small girl had a chance at living a regular human life. Riley would have given up an arm if it meant that Ryan could have the same. Trissy's oldest daughter Mia was also born human. She sat on the veranda, immersed in her phone, bored like she'd already witnessed enough werewolf shit to last her a lifetime. The kitchen door swung open and Vanessa walked through. Vanessa was the same age as Trissy, but she appeared years younger with shiny black hair that fell to her waist, long tanned legs, and full lips covered in dark lipstick. She was wearing a short purple dress that hugged her curvy frame along with a black leather jacket. Vanessa pulled open the fridge and took out a small tub of yogurt. Was that Scotty out there? She asked. Yes, said Riley. He asked me to help him out with the new girl. Oh. Riley put down the dish she was holding. What do you mean, oh? Nothing, said Vanessa. Really? It's just. Vanessa pulled a spoon out of a drawer. I can never tell if he's into you or just wants to be your bestie. Riley's heart skipped a beat. Scott's nice to everyone, Riley said while trying her best to remain composed. Don't get me wrong, we all know that Scotty gets high off appreciation. Vanessa took a seat at the table and started eating yogurt from the tub. But you're gonna have to make a move before some needy bitch digs his claws into him. Riley cringed. It's not like that. So you don't find him attractive? No. Not even a little? Riley bit her lower lip. It was hard to explain. Scott was great. He was everything she should want in a boyfriend, but whenever Riley imagined doing anything more than hugging, she was met with a mental block, like her mind refused to accept the possibility. Whenever Riley imagined sex, all thoughts led straight back to Ryan's father. She scrubbed at one plate far harder than necessary. Nothing is going to happen between us. Vanessa rolled her eyes. It's been years since you had that kid, but you still refuse to date anyone. Vanessa licked the back of the spoon. When are you going to get out there? Again. I will, said Riley. Maybe once Ryan gets older. Like how old? 18. Vanessa laughed. Your pussy will be drier than Trissy's by then. No, it won't, Riley muttered. I just don't want Ryan to go through what I did growing up. I didn't like any of my step-parents. I'm not saying that you have to marry anyone, said Vanessa. Just go out and have fun every once in a while. I could introduce you to some guys I know. No, thank you, Riley quickly replied. All of Vanessa's hookups tended to be older men with weird bestiality kinks. Trissy forbade Vanessa from bringing any more men into the house. They were only allowed in the shed. Riley had heard plenty of things from the sex shed that she'd rather forget. Okay, suit yourself. Vanessa walked out of the kitchen. But the offer is always open. Okay. Riley sighed. I'll keep that in mind. Vanessa was probably right. but Riley didn't feel the need to date anyone. She was far too busy trying to sort out the fallout from her last relationship. When Riley found out that she was pregnant, she thought that raising the baby alone would be the right thing to do. Her own mother was a single parent for years, so Riley thought that she could do it too. She planned to work and go back to school part-time, but raising a child was far harder than she ever imagined, not to mention one who was also a werewolf. Asking her family to help was out of the question, so she only had Scott, Trissy and Vanessa to fall back on. There was barely any work in East Cove, so her crappy part-time job wasn't enough to afford rent. Looking after Ryan took up the rest of her time. It was too dangerous to put him in a regular school, so she had to homeschool him herself. It would be years before Riley could even think of going to college. She was stuck as a single mother living below the poverty line. She had escaped werewolf society and entered her own personal hell. Riley's eyes burned, but she held back the tears. She refused to let anyone catch her crying. She'd stay strong. For Ryan's sake. Chapter 3. Riley spent the next morning failing to homeschool Ryan. He liked listening to songs and watching videos on her phone, but it was impossible to make him sit down and concentrate. He'd soon become distracted and walk away, transforming into a wolf to wreak havoc around the house if she didn't let him outside. And then the little turtle went over to Mr. Rabbit's house, said Riley as she half-heartedly showed Ryan a bright picture book. But Mr. Rabbit was still dash. She was cut off by Ryan lunging forward to turn the pages. Come on, Ryan, Riley moaned. Just let me tell the story. Ryan ripped the book from her hand, rapidly flipping through the pages as he looked at the pictures. Riley was too exhausted to fight with him. What was Mr. Rabbit doing? Asked Trissy's daughter Andrea. She was sitting at the children's table, coloring book and crayons neatly laid out before her. She was wearing a bright pink dress and her short blonde hair was tied back into two adorable pigtails. Beside her sat one of the twins. He held several pencils in his fist as he rubbed them against the paper until they made a hole. He was doing a poo, the small boy cried out. Andrea and her brother burst into laughter, cackling at the top of their lungs. Despite being younger than Ryan, Andrea had no trouble talking. She was picking up new words every day, and would often ask questions about the world around her. She also didn't throw tantrums over having to wear clothes. Watching her progress only made Riley feel worse about Ryan. What if there was something developmentally wrong with her son? Ryan went and stood before the door, furiously pointing at the lock like he wanted to go out. Riley let out a sigh and went to unlock the door. Ryan dashed outside the moment that it cracked open, transforming into a black wolf and disappearing behind the trees. Riley closed the door and went back into the kitchen, cleaning up all the books and pencils that Ryan had thrown on the floor. You're wasting your time, said Trissy as she walked past carrying a large basket of fresh laundry. The wolf is strong in that one. Were your kids like this? No, she said. But their father would have bit their head off if they didn't do as they were told. Riley's heart sank. It was just another reminder that she couldn't control her own child. Just give it another year or two, said Trissy when she noticed the devastation on Riley's face. Werewolf children develop differently to humans. Yeah, Riley muttered. Maybe. She arranged all the picture books into a neat pile. Do you think that Ryan's father would know what to do? Hell if I know, huffed Trissy. I've never met him. Riley realized how stupid her question sounded. Didn't you say that he was an arrogant werewolf fascist with 7 wives? Asked Trissy. Riley felt her face turning red. I don't think I would have said that. No. I think you did, said Trissy. I also remember you saying that he was a sex-crazed blonde supremacist with bitchy parents. Well. Riley looked to Andrea and her brother to see the 2 small children, watching them with rapt attention. I was a little angry after we broke up. Just a little? Okay. Maybe a lot, Riley sighed. She finished picking up the pencils, then slipped them back into their tin. Riley thought of asking Trissy her opinion on meeting Elijah, then decided against it. Trissy was trapped in an oppressive group of werewolves for years. She would certainly advise Riley against meeting Elijah. I have some stuff that I need to do after work today, said Riley. I might be home a little later than normal. Just as long as it's not too late, said Trissy. In case you haven't forgotten, I still have another 7 children that I'm trying to keep alive. 6, Riley almost corrected. Trissy's oldest son had refused to leave with her. "Am I alive, Mummy?" asked Andrea from her table. "Of course, sweetie," Trissy said with a small smile. "It shouldn't be too late," said Riley. "I'll let you know if anything comes up." "All right," said Trissy. "And let me know if Vanessa talks about bringing any men back." Jacob went into the shed to get a shovel this morning, only to find. She glanced over to her children. One of her friends naked and handcuffed to the wall. "Oh," said Riley. "That's one conversation with my son that I never want to have again." Trissy pushed open the door and carried the laundry out to the clothesline. "I'll let you know if she says anything," Riley called out. "What does chained mean?" Andrea asked. "Well," Riley tried to think of an appropriate answer. "It means poo," her brother replied, sending the two children into a fit of giggles again. Riley watched them fall to the floor as they continued their exaggerated laughter like it was a new game. Sometimes she was glad that Ryan didn't talk. Riley's shift at the cafe seemed to drag on forever. Weekday afternoons were always quiet. She spent most of the time cleaning down counters and arranging cupboards. Vanessa lingered more than usual, occasionally looking in Riley's direction. Riley suspected that Scott had told her about Elijah. Scott and Vanessa once dated, even though Riley had a hard time imagining Scott being into Vanessa's weird kinks. Let her stay, Riley thought as Vanessa helped herself to a fifth cup of coffee. At least there'll be someone around in case something goes wrong. Once 4:30 arrived, Riley's anxiety spiked. Maybe she couldn't do it? Perhaps it was a terrible idea? Was it too late to cancel? Riley wanted to go home and hide, but Elijah knew where she worked. He'd find her eventually. She was fucked. Vanessa appeared before Riley, carrying her coat and keys. "I'm heading out," said Vanessa. "Some guy wants to meet me down at the beach. Are you okay closing up by yourself?" "Yep." Riley tried not to let her anxiety show. "Not a problem." "Okay," said Vanessa hesitantly like she could see through Riley's act. "Let me know if anything comes up." "Will do," Riley nervously laughed. "Enjoy your night." "Oh, I will," Vanessa said with a wink. She put on her coat and walked out the door, leaving Riley alone in the store. Riley grabbed a broom and started sweeping the floor. Maybe she and Ryan could run away? They could build a cabin in the wilderness. And Ryan could run free. They could spend the rest of their lives living as loners in the forest. The bell above the door jingled. Riley looked up to see Elijah enter. He looked out of place amongst her new life. His crisp outfit clashed with the worn antique furniture surrounding them. "Riley," he said with a small nod. Riley's heart skipped a beat. Her name sounded good when it rolled off his tongue. Memories of what else he used to do with that tongue floated to the surface of her mind. "Hey." Riley hastily propped the broom against the wall and wiped her hands on her apron. "Can I get you anything? A coffee? Or tea? Maybe a bagel?" Elijah slipped his jacket off his shoulders, unveiling a dark blue sweater, which neatly fit his broad chest. "A coffee would be great, thanks." "Sure, coming right up." Riley hid herself behind the coffee machine as she made his drink, trying to avoid looking at him as much as possible. She could still remember what he looked like under that sweater. "Stop it," she told herself. "You shouldn't be thinking about that." "How do you prefer your coffee?" Riley asked. "Latte cappuccino." "Flat white." Elijah took a seat on one of the couches at the front of the store. "Whichever is fine." "Okay," said Riley. "Latte it is." She finished preparing his drink and brought it out to Elijah, placing it down on the small table before them. Riley took a seat on the sofa opposite him. She was surprised when he continued to stare at her. "Aren't you having anything?" Elijah asked. "Crap," Riley thought as she felt a stab of embarrassment. She was too busy thinking about Elijah to get her own drink. "Oh, I'm not really that thirsty," she said with a wave of her hand. "Go ahead." "Okay." Elijah reached forward to hesitantly take a sip. Riley gazed down at his elegant hands and well-kept nails. She never expected to be sitting face to face with Elijah again. But things were different now. She wasn't a stupid teenager anymore. She wouldn't allow herself to be so easily controlled by her hormones again. "So," Riley tried to think of a way to break the silence. "What have you been up to these past 5 years?" "Not much," said Elijah. "I moved back home and started helping my grandfather." "Like looking after him?" "No." Elijah laughed, tension leaving his shoulders. He can still look after himself. He just wants me to help him with work. Oh, what sort of work does he do? Things for the council. Mostly meetings with elders and traveling to other clans. Is that what brought you out here? Yeah. He took a sip of coffee. You could say that. Elijah's gaze seemed to pierce straight through her. Riley looked down at her lap. She wished that she had her own beverage to keep her hands busy. What about you? Elijah asked. Have you been out here the whole time? I went back home for a bit, but she wasn't sure how to explain it without mentioning Ryan. I decided to come live out here with some friends. Must be some friends. Yeah. They're all very unique. Do you like working here? He gestured to the space around them. It's all right, Riley said. It's okay for now, but I hope to go back to school later. Elijah nodded while taking another sip of coffee. Riley's hands gripped her apron. She wanted to talk about Ryan, but once she told him there was no going back. How's Latavia? Riley blurted out. Shit, she thought. That was way too direct. Elijah didn't look bothered. He calmly placed his mug down on the saucer. I wouldn't know. We haven't spoken in months. Oh. The elders decided everything for us. We were never a good couple. I'm sorry to hear that, Riley said, even though part of her was glad. She didn't want to see that stuck-up bitch again. It's okay, said Elijah. Maybe things are better this way. Yeah, Riley said. Perhaps. What about you? Elijah asked. Are you dating anyone? No, Riley laughed. I'm not really into dating. I'm a bit of a lone wolf. She paused when she realized how ridiculous that sounded. Excuse the pun. You're excused, Elijah slyly smiled. Silence grew between them as Riley ran out of small talk ideas. She tapped her fingers on her knee, gathering her courage. It would be cowardly to back down. She needed to tell him. Elijah. It took immense effort to force the words out of her mouth. There's something that I need to tell you. What is it? He asked softly, like he could sense her distress. I had a son. Her gaze fell to the floor, too afraid to see his reaction. Your son? Elijah was silent as he processed her words. Are you sure? Yes, I didn't sleep with anyone else. Riley's face felt numb as her lower lip trembled. The stress from the past 5 years came crashing down. She was powerless to stop the tears that flowed forth. Don't cry, you idiot, Riley told herself, but it was already too late. Elijah quickly put down his mug. He got up to sit beside her on the sofa, wrapping one arm around her back. Hey, he said gently. There's no need to cry. Children are a blessing. Riley couldn't help but inhale his scent. It was duller because of her medication, but it was still familiar and comforting. Him. Felt like they had never been apart. Riley buried her face against Elijah's sweater. I know, she sobbed. I know. Elijah was silent as he let Riley cry it out, occasionally patting her back. Was he always this gentle? Tell me about him, Elijah asked softly. His name is Ryan. Riley struggled to pull herself away. She picked up a discarded napkin to wipe her face. He kinda looks like you, and he has so much energy. Is he a werewolf? Yes. That's good. Really? It had only caused Riley stress until that moment. Of course, said Elijah like it was the most natural thing in the world. He's been blessed. Of course Elijah would think that, thought Riley. He spent his entire life surrounded by werewolves. Children like Ryan were nothing strange where Elijah was from. Would you like to meet him? Riley asked. Of course. Elijah's mouth broke out into a grin. My car is parked out front. Now, Riley exclaimed. Why not? Elijah's smile disappeared as he noticed her shocked expression. Or not. No, it's fine. Riley stood to her feet and started clearing the table. We can go now. If Elijah was going to meet Ryan eventually, then it might as well be now. Riley picked up Elijah's empty cup. Just give me a moment to close. Chapter 4. Trissy was outside watching her children play as Elijah's car rolled up the gravel driveway. There were bags under her eyes and she was clearly exhausted. Andrea had her tiny arms wrapped around Trissy's neck, loudly sobbing like she had skipped her nap again. Trissy raked her critical gaze over Elijah's toned body as they emerged from the car. You're gonna have to do it in the shed, Trissy said. Riley wanted to roll over and die. We're not going to be doing that. she muttered, face turning red. Elijah looked between them. Doing what? Nothing, Riley snapped back. The house is pretty crowded, so sometimes we just entertain guests in the shed. In a shed? It's a very lovely shed, Riley said, even though it was a lie. There was nothing in there except old garden tools, broken furniture, and a crappy bed. That was stained from Vanessa's sexcapades. Trissy's son Jacob transformed into a human boy, spitting a frisbee out of his mouth. Is he going to come live with us? Jacob enthusiastically asked. Of course not, Trissy snapped. She can move in with him. Where's Ryan? Riley quickly asked. Trissy was a nightmare to deal with when she was exhausted, and Riley needed to get away before the children's questions got any worse. Last time I saw him he was playing in the sandbox, Trissy said. Okay, thanks. Riley grabbed Elijah's sleeve, quickly tugging him away. Sorry about that, she muttered. Trissy's pretty snappy when she's had a rough day. Is she one of the friends you were talking about? Kinda, in a way. Riley didn't even know Trissy until after Ryan was born. We mostly just use each other for childcare. Elijah gazed around at the run-down house and overgrown fields. Is this really where you live? It seems kinda old. Yeah, but the rent's cheap and it has tons of space. Is that a goat? Yep, great for free milk. Riley dragged Elijah to the back of the house. Ryan was sitting alone in the sandbox. He was pushing a plastic truck around several buckets, making exaggerated beeping noises. Ryan, Riley called out. He looked up and smiled when he saw Riley, but looked hesitantly at Elijah, like he didn't know what to think. Usually he would immediately run over to greet her, but instead he stayed put. Hey Ryan, Riley said gently as they approached him. There's someone that I want you to meet. She pointed to Elijah. This is your father. Riley wasn't sure what she expected. Maybe some dramatic heartfelt reunion, like a daytime Christian movie. But instead Ryan just shrugged his shoulders and went back to playing, pushing his truck over a mountain of sand like they weren't even there. Ryan, Riley said more hopefully, don't you want to say hello? Ryan shook his head. Elijah took a step closer and lowered himself to Ryan's level. He took one of the trucks in the sandbox and attempted to place it beside Ryan's, but Ryan completely freaked out. The small boy jumped to his feet and dashed behind Riley, clinging to her leg. It was worse than she expected. I'm sorry, Riley apologized. He's very shy. It usually takes him a while to warm up to people. It's okay, Elijah said calmly, but the disappointment was obvious on his face. I know what kids can be like. Ryan. Riley tried to pry her son from her leg, but he refused to let go. Why don't you show Elijah your trucks? Ryan shook his head. Ryan, Riley begged, but her son refused to budge. Just say hello. How about I come back tomorrow? Said Elijah. It's getting late, so he must be tired. I'm sorry, said Riley. He's usually much more energetic. It's okay, said Elijah. You don't need to apologize. He likes the beach down the road, said Riley. Maybe we could go there tomorrow morning, if it's not too much trouble. No, it's no trouble at all. I have to make some calls in the morning, but I can come after that. Great. Riley smiled. Did you hear that, Ryan? She patted her son on the back. We're going to the beach tomorrow. Ryan didn't let go of her leg, but for one short moment there was a small smile on his face. Riley felt hope. Well, I should get going. Elijah took a step back. We can talk more tomorrow. Okay, said Riley. Sounds good. She walked with Elijah back to his car. The new white hybrid was smeared with dirt from the drive-in. Jacob and his sister Tabitha had their faces pressed to the window, gazing in to admire the decor. Okay, time to back off, kids, said Riley. Elijah needs to go home. Tabitha curiously gazed up at Elijah. Is he a maybe man? A maybe man? Asked Riley. Vanessa calls them maybe mans, said Tabitha, 'cause one of them maybe gets to be her boyfriend. Riley cringed. No, Tabitha. Who's Vanessa? Asked Elijah. Just another woman who lives here. Riley nervously laughed while nudging Jacob and Tabitha back from the car. How many people live here? Elijah asked. 10, said Jacob. 13, said his sister. Come on, guys. Riley threw her arms around the children's shoulders and started leading them back to the house. Don't you guys have chores to do? There's 10, Jacob snapped back at Tabitha. 13, Tabitha yelled back. 10. What about Wilfred and Sunny? Tabitha whined. Those are fucking chickens, Tabitha. Language. Trissy yelled out from across the yard. I'll see you tomorrow, Riley called out to Elijah. Elijah watched her with a perplexed expression before hopping into his car. He gave Riley one last wave before reversing back down the driveway. Trissy walked over to scold Jacob, but he immediately fled, transforming back into a wolf and dashing into the forest. Trissy let out an exasperated sigh and looked to where Elijah's car had been parked moments earlier. George was like that too, said Trissy. Always showing up with the sad puppy eyes to try and make me take him back. It's not like that, Riley said. She didn't like Trissy lumping Elijah in with her crazy ex-husband. Whatever you say, Trissy muttered and returned to her other children. Come on. Riley took hold of Tabitha's shoulders and led her inside. Let's get started on dinner. Chapter 6. The next morning, Riley thought of calling off the meeting with Elijah, but she didn't want to explain why. Sorry, I had a vivid sex dream about you, then used it to wank myself stupid. Didn't sound like a good excuse. At least Ryan would be there. Riley didn't have to worry about her vagina running wild as long as her son was around. Riley got dressed and ready for the day. She brushed her teeth while anxiously staring at her phone, wondering if Elijah would call or text before showing. Maybe he wouldn't come? Maybe one afternoon with her was enough to send him running back to the mountains? Riley jumped when she noticed Vanessa's reflection in the mirror. Vanessa was standing behind Riley, leaning against the door frame with her arms crossed over her chest. She was wearing a tight black t-shirt and small denim shorts. Geez. Riley spat into the sink. Don't scare me like that. A smile crept across Vanessa's face. You didn't tell me that your ex was hot. He's not really an ex, Riley muttered. I don't think that we were together long enough to count as dating. Then what do you call it? More like a summer fling-ish. Vanessa nodded. She walked into the bathroom and started picking up the discarded towels. Given all the bitching and moaning you made about him, I thought that he'd be uglier. I never said that he was ugly. But you never said that he was hot either. Why did you break up? His mother was a bitch. Vanessa huffed. All mothers are bitches. His fiancée was also a bitch. Ouch. Weren't keen on being the third wheel. No, Riley pulled a bottle of makeup from the cupboard and began applying it to her face. I'm pretty sure that there was a fourth and fifth wheel rolling around somewhere too. Yeah, typical. That's just how werewolves tend to roll. Vanessa placed the towels into the laundry basket. That's why I gave up on relationships long ago. Riley nodded. She doubted that Vanessa would ever let herself get tied down, even if she wasn't a werewolf. Riley paused while screwing the lid back onto her foundation. Hey, how do you even know what Elijah looks like? She had no memory of Vanessa and Elijah being in the same place at once. Because he's outside right now, said Vanessa. Shit. Riley threw the rest of her makeup back into her bag. How long's he been there? Not long. Jacob's interrogating him now as we speak. Riley cracked open the window and peered outside. Elijah was standing before his car with Jacob curiously looking up at him. Trissy's oldest daughter Mia was off her phone for once. She stood behind Jacob, letting out the occasional giggle as she stared up at Elijah. Why are you so pale? Asked Jacob. Are you a vampire? Riley quickly pulled her head back inside. Do I look okay? Riley asked Vanessa. Should I put on some lipstick? But that might make me look like I'm trying too hard. You look fine. Vanessa smiled. Really? Riley looked down at the simple t-shirt and long skirt that she was wearing. Maybe I should change into something else. Are you trying to get into his pants? No. Then why does it matter? Vanessa had a good point. It would be cool if Ryan had a little brother, echoed Jacob's voice from outside. Riley quickly scooped up her things and dumped them into the cupboard under the sink. She returned the child lock, then rushed out of the room. Good luck, Vanessa yelled after her. Ryan was watching TV. He was immersed in a cartoon about dogs dancing with Andrea to the theme song as she sang it at the top of her lungs. By the time Riley got him ready and out of the house, Trissy's children had already dragged Elijah into the garden, giving him a tour of the flowers and vegetables. These are my potatoes, said Jacob. pointing to an overgrown vegetable garden. With utmost seriousness. We'd all starve to death if it weren't for me. Elijah looked like he needed saving. Hey! Elijah smiled with relief when Riley approached him. Are you ready? Yes. Riley smiled. Let's get out of here. The beach was a small cove situated between two hills. It was a short walk from the farm and far from town, so only the people who lived nearby ever used it. Riley and Ryan usually spent hours there without anyone showing up. Ryan kept his distance from Elijah for most of the walk. He trailed behind them in wolf form, but seemed less hesitant than the previous day. Elijah tried to greet him, but Ryan hid straight behind Riley. Riley's heart sank. How could she get him to open up? Elijah rustled around in his pocket. He pulled out what looked like a small candy wrapped in silver paper. He offered it to Ryan. Their son eyed it curiously. What's that? Riley asked. It's dried meat, said Elijah. It's pretty popular with werewolf kids. Ryan paused and transformed back into his human form. He snatched it out of Elijah's hand, then unwrapped the paper and popped the piece of dried meat into his mouth, happily chewing it. Riley smiled. It was a start. They followed a narrow path through the forest and soon emerged at the beach. The overcast sky made the ocean appear gray. Riley plunked her bag down on the coarse sand. She rolled out a blanket for them to sit on. No swimming today, Riley said to Ryan. She reached into her bag to pull out some toys. The water is cold, so dash. There was a loud splashing as Ryan dove straight into the waves. Riley groaned and turned around. Ryan happily frolicked in the water in wolf form, bouncing through the waves like an overeager puppy. If Riley forced him out, it would only lead to a meltdown. Elijah laughed. Kids, huh? He never listens to me, Riley huffed. He's gonna catch a cold. It's okay, said Elijah. He's a werewolf. A little cold water won't hurt him. Maybe, but it's still dangerous. And he's always trying to go out deeper. I'll watch him. Elijah slipped off his jacket, followed by his shirt, jeans, and underwear. It was the first time that Riley had seen Elijah naked in years, but his strong body didn't differ much from her steamy dreams. Riley quickly forced herself to look away before he could catch her staring. She'd forgotten how casual werewolves were about nudity. Elijah's bones cracked as he transformed. His body shrunk and spouted fur, until his form shifted into a large white wolf. His glossy fur was pale like the moon, and his blue eyes retained their alluring gaze. Seeing Elijah's wolf form stirred something within Riley. She shifted uncomfortably as she shoved the strange feeling back into the depths of her mind. Elijah dashed into the water and joined Ryan in the waves, interacting with him in ways that Riley wouldn't dare. Ryan looked thrilled to have an adult wolf giving him attention, running in circles like he was trying to play tag. Riley hadn't transformed into a wolf in years. The medication worked well when she was in human form, but if she changed into a wolf, it was impossible to block out all the strange urges. She wasn't sure what her inner wolf would do if she let it roam free. She had long decided that it would be better to live out the rest of her life as a human. Riley drew patterns in the sand by her feet, glancing up at Ryan and Elijah every now and again to see what they were doing. All of Ryan's shyness seemed to have disappeared. He happily followed Elijah as they paddled through the water. After an hour of playing, Elijah emerged, transforming back into a human as he walked across the sand. His soaked hair was plastered to his face as droplets of water rolled down his smooth chest. He strode towards her without an ounce of shame. Phew! Riley thought as blood rushed to her face. She quickly looked down at her feet, trying to get her breathing under control, while thinking unsexy thoughts. Pregnancy, childbirth, sleepless nights, Riley thought as she tried to get her vagina under control. He's only walking around but naked because werewolves have no shame. Elijah took a towel from her bag to pat himself dry. If Riley just turned her head, she'd definitely get a clear view of his balls. This couldn't go on any longer. We should start heading back soon. The words quickly rolled off her tongue. I have to get ready for work. Elijah dried his hair. At the coffee shop? Yes, the coffee shop. Riley had a shift at 2, so it wasn't a complete lie. Okay. Elijah picked up his shirt from the sand. Let's head back. Riley managed to coax Ryan out of the water by showing him kids' videos on her phone. The annoying melodies and bright animation drove her insane, but they were like crack to small children. Ryan emerged out of the water like a moth to a flashlight, following behind Riley as she kept the phone just out of his reach. Elijah was silent during the walk back. He occasionally glanced at her and Ryan. Riley assumed that he was feeling down because he'd soon have to leave. Maybe he had to leave town and wouldn't be back for a while. What if he became too caught up in his new life to visit them again? Riley wanted to help him build a relationship with their son, but she didn't know how. She'd never had a decent male role model growing up, and her own father stopped reaching out once he married his second wife. What if the same thing happened to Ryan? Their son immediately rushed off to play in the sandpit as soon as they got home. Riley walked closer to see Scott and Abigail checking out Jacob's vegetable garden. Abigail was using one of Riley's old shirts as a dress. It only came down to the top of her thighs, but Riley was too busy mulling over Elijah to notice the young woman's questionable fashion choices. Hey, it's great to see you again. Abigail rushed towards Riley with a bright smile, engulfing Riley in a tight hug. Right back at you, Riley wheezed, half-heartedly patting her back. She was unaware that they were now friends. Hey. Scott walked over, eyeing Elijah hesitantly. I brought Abigail over to meet Trissy and the kids. Andrea is so cute. Abigail squealed. I wonder if I'll have any werewolf kids. You might have to get with a werewolf for that to happen, said Riley. She'd heard that the chances were a lot lower for people who had been born human. Abigail pulled away from Riley. Her eyes gazed over Elijah, mouth curving up into a shy smile. Who's your friend? She whispered to Riley. Oh, that's just Ryan's father, said Riley. Your husband? No, Riley hissed back. It was only a one-time thing. So you're not together at all? God, no, Riley quickly replied. Just trying out the co-parenting thing. Is that so? Abigail's mouth curved up into a sly smile. Before Riley could stop her, she pranced over to Elijah, swaying her hips like she wasn't even bothering to be subtle. Why, hello there, Abigail said playfully and held out one hand. I don't think we've met. Elijah stared at her blankly like he wasn't fooled by her flirting. There's no need to be shy, Abigail laughed and moved in closer. I'm Abigail. What's your name? She reached out to place a hand on Elijah's bicep, but Elijah's hand shot out to grab her wrist. Don't touch me, he growled, then knocked her hand away. Abigail looked shocked. She took a step back, anxiously rubbing her wrist. I'm sorry. Abigail's voice was strained. She blinked several times as she tried to hold back tears. I don't know what came over me. Scott stepped forward and placed a comforting arm around her shoulder. It's okay. Why don't you go take a break inside? Yeah, said Abigail. That sounds like a good idea. She slipped out of Scott's grip and walked towards the house, pace slow and lethargic as though caught in a daze. Scott looked directly at Elijah. Shouldn't you be heading off too? He said firmly. Seriously? Riley thought. Could he be any colder? Elijah didn't look pleased either. Riley could tell that he wanted to say something, but he took one look at Riley, then ground his teeth. Yeah, I was just about to leave. He reached forward to give Riley a brief hug. I'll catch you later. Riley's body tingled from his touch. Her head felt foggy. Yeah, later, she mumbled. Elijah waved goodbye to Ryan, who was fully immersed in the sandpit. See you later, buddy. Ryan gave him a small wave back without looking away from his toys. Scott didn't back down. He remained silent and stoic until Elijah got back into his car and disappeared down the road. What was that? Riley snapped at Scott. Why were you so rude? You don't even know him. Oh, I think I know enough, said Scott. He was only defending himself from Abigail's creepy flirting. She's a new werewolf, Riley. She's not in control of her own actions. She seemed completely in control to me. I thought that you of all people would understand what it's like to lose control in front of the opposite sex. What's that supposed to mean? Riley snapped. Scott fell silent. He glanced to the ground and rubbed his jaw. Look, He grabbed Riley's elbow, pulling her further into the field and out of Ryan's earshot. Don't you think this is all moving a little fast? You only ran into him 2 days ago, but he's already hanging out with Ryan. He's Ryan's father. He deserves a chance to get to know his own son. But what's he even doing in East Cove? He has work. What sort of work? I don't know. Just work. How long is he here for? I don't know. Where is he staying? I don't know, Riley huffed. I haven't asked yet, okay? What's with the interrogation? Scott's grip tightened around her arm. Riley didn't like the way that he was looking at her. It was the look that he had when he was talking to his charity cases. Don't you think that it's kinda suspicious, said Scott calmly, that he just shows up out of the blue and suddenly has all this free time to spend with you? And Ryan? No, not if he's doing remote work or something. But why here? Maybe he came for the scenery. In the off-season? What's your problem? Riley ripped her arm out of his grip. Are you jealous? Or something? Jealous? Scott laughed. Why would I be jealous? I dunno, Riley muttered. Because there's suddenly someone who wants to spend time with me for a change. That things might actually start going well in my life. That I won't be one of your little damsels in distress anymore. That's ridiculous, Scott scoffed. I'm only looking out for you. Well, maybe I don't need looking out for. Look, Scott was doing the nervous jaw-rubbing thing again. Have you ever heard of imprinting? No. It happens with some animals, maybe werewolves too. They become insanely attached to someone and they can't let go. Riley almost laughed. You think that Elijah has imprinted on me? Perhaps. That's ridiculous, Riley scoffed. He's not obsessed with me. And how would you know? Well, he's left me alone for years, and he hasn't once mentioned getting back together. Maybe it's all part of his plan? Maybe he's deliberately giving you space so that you'll let him in. That's so stupid. Elijah's not like that. Really? And how would you know? From what you've told me about this guy, it sounds like you don't really know him either. You're unbelievable, Riley muttered and took a step back. You just don't know when to stop. Riley spun on her heels, walking back to the house. Ask him, Scott yelled out after her. Ask him what he's really doing out here. Fine, Riley yelled back. Maybe I will. You'll see. Just go home, Scott. Riley angrily wrapped her arms around her torso. She couldn't believe that Scott was being such an arse. What did he know? He'd barely even spoken to Elijah. He didn't know what sort of relationship Riley and Elijah had in the past. It wasn't as fucked up as what Abigail or Trissy went through. Riley knew what was best for herself and Ryan. Scott needed to butt out and let her make her own decisions. She could handle everything on her own. Chapter 7. The cafe was empty for most of the afternoon. There were only a few customers who stopped by for takeout coffee and one businessman who came to use the Wi-Fi. He sat alone at a table typing, so most of Riley's shift was spent cleaning behind the counter. Scott's annoying words echoed throughout Riley's head, making it difficult to concentrate. She needed to have a talk with Scott about staying out of her business. He wasn't her father. He didn't have any right to tell her what to do. Riley received a text message from Elijah towards the end of her shift. Hey, Elijah wrote. It was great spending time with you and Ryan today. I hope that I can see you both again soon. His words brought a small smile to Riley's face. She reread the message several times. Ask him what he's really doing out here, echoed Scott's words in her head. Riley tried to push them back down into the depths of her mind, but they kept echoing back. Ask him, ask him, ask him. At least it would give her a reason to meet Elijah again. Hey, Riley slowly typed back. Are you free tonight or tomorrow? I'd like to meet you alone to talk more about Ryan. She sent the message, then slipped her phone back in her pocket. It vibrated 5 minutes later. I'm free tonight, Elijah wrote. I'll come pick you up after your shift ends. Great, Riley wrote back. I'll be outside waiting at 5. Great. See you then, he wrote back. Riley placed her phone down on the counter so that she wouldn't be tempted to keep looking at it. Tonight she'd confront Elijah and prove to Scott that he was wrong. There weren't many good places to eat in East Cove. There was a Chinese restaurant owned by an elderly couple, and a takeaway store by the beach. It sold fish and chips along with various fried foods. It was cheap, so Riley usually brought some back for Ryan and the kids. Riley bought a large fish and chips while Elijah waited in the car. She then directed him to a small park by the beach. It was usually crowded during the summer, but it was mostly empty during the off-season. There was a small barbecue area full of wooden tables and chairs. It gave them a good view of the beach and the setting sun. 2 children were playing on a rusted swing set as their parents attempted to Rustle them home for the day. Do you ever come here with Ryan? Elijah asked as they sat down at a wooden table. Not yet. Riley slowly unwrapped the paper around the fish and chips. It's hard to keep him from transforming, and he still doesn't like wearing clothes. So he just spends all his time at that farm? Yeah, but we go to a lot of places nearby that don't have many people, like the mountains and some beaches. But nowhere far away? We'll go once he's older. Riley shivered. She did up the buttons on her jacket to ward off the evening chill. It's difficult to raise a werewolf child so close to humans. Elijah munched on a fry. There are too many differences. The elders don't allow it. Well, they're not here, are they? Said Riley. Mentions of werewolf society were enough to put her on edge. The more she learned about their ways, the more she came to dislike them. Riley anxiously munched down several fries as she tried to think of what to say next. It was time to cut the pointless small talk. She needed to find out what Elijah was really doing in East Cove. So, Riley tried to ask as casually as possible. Where are you staying now? There's a bunch of holiday villas on the way in. I've set up shop there for the time being. Yeah, I know the place, said Riley. I did some cleaning there over the summer. Elijah raised an eyebrow. How many jobs do you have? Just the coffee shop, said Riley. But I do some other things during summer. More tourists come, so lots of work pops up. Sounds busy. Not really. It's all part-time and casual. It's hard to find any good full-time work in this dump. Elijah nodded like he was thinking her words over. What about you? Asked Riley. What sort of work have you been doing out here? Just making documents and answering calls, said Elijah. The council wants to know about any werewolves living in the area. So you told them about us? Not yet. He picked up a piece of fish and took a bite. Would you prefer if I don't? Of course. She almost laughed. I don't want those people knowing anything about me. But they can help you, said Elijah. Werewolves should stick together. Why? Said Riley. So that they can control my life and take my kid? It's not like that, said Elijah. They'd never remove a child from their family without a good reason. Are you sure? I won't let it happen, said Elijah. I promise. He seemed sincere, but Riley found it difficult to believe. I don't want those people to know anything about Ryan, she said. Why? They're his family too. But I'm the one who raised him, said Riley. He's my son. But he'd be better off amongst real werewolves. You're just suppressing his potential by forcing him to be human. I'm not forcing him to be human. Yes, you are. You shouldn't be hiding him away out here with those people. Those people are my friends. But not one of them is a real werewolf. They don't know how to raise him properly. If you come back with me, I can help you both. I don't need your help. Riley crossed her arms over her chest as anger began to build. We're doing fine here. Really, because you don't look it. You're living in this shitty town in the middle of nowhere, sharing a crowded shack, and cleaning like a maid. Riley was too shocked to speak. What the fuck did he just say? Elijah hadn't changed. He hadn't changed at all. He was still the same pretentious stuck-up arsehole that she knew 5 years ago. These people have clearly brainwashed you, Elijah continued, oblivious to her horror. You're a werewolf now. You shouldn't be forced to live this way. How dare you, Riley hissed. How dare you come back into my life and tell me what to do? She quickly gathered her things and stood to her feet. This was all a mistake. She moved to leave, but Elijah's hand quickly lunged out to grab her wrist. No, please, he begged. Please don't leave. Riley tugged her arm. Let go of me, Elijah. No, please. Elijah said. Don't go. I'll scream for help. I can't live without you. It sounded so outrageous that Riley stopped fighting him. What? Elijah anxiously looked away like he was too embarrassed to make eye contact, mouth opening and closing as he searched for words. I couldn't be the same after you left, he said softly. It always felt like part of me was missing until I saw you again. That's ridiculous. Riley ripped her arm out of his grip. We were barely together and I haven't seen you in years. It doesn't matter, said Elijah. I thought that I could forget you, but no. Matter how hard I try, it doesn't get better. I need you. You need a therapist. Riley snapped. It didn't work. Elijah angrily tugged on his hair. Nothing works because we're fated, ma dash. Not this shit again, Riley moaned. I know that you feel it too, Elijah begged. No, I don't. Riley snapped, but it wasn't a complete lie. She did feel an urge. A strange pulling towards him. He consumed her thoughts. And her dreams, but it didn't control her. Riley's human mind could reason that such feelings were stupid and that she shouldn't give in to them. Unlike Elijah, she was fully in control of her own shit. I don't feel anything, Riley lied. That's because they've drugged you, Elijah said. I can smell it. Phew. Only embraced your true self, then you'd understand that dash. Enough, Riley said. I don't want to hear it. Riley dash. Just go home, Elijah. Riley took a step back, putting some distance between them. Nothing's going to happen between us. What about Ryan? I'll call you and maybe we can work something out, but first I need some space. No. He shook his head. It's never going to work. We have to be together. Grow up, Riley yelled back. I don't belong to you. You can't just waltz into my life and expect me to throw myself at your feet. Just leave me alone. Like a decent human being. Elijah was lost for words. He looked taken back for a moment, but then angrily crossed his arms like a spoiled child who'd just been punished. Fine, Elijah angrily muttered. Finally, Riley thought. At least he wasn't impossible. If you won't listen, said Elijah, then I'll just have to make you understand. A cold chill ran down Riley's spine. She needed to leave. Goodbye, Elijah. Riley took one step in front of the other. I'll call you when I'm ready. Elijah didn't say anything. Riley quickly glanced over her shoulder to see that he hadn't moved, silently watching her with an unreadable expression. What had she done? Chapter 8. He did what? Echoed Scott's voice over the phone. Riley took a seat on her bed. She was already dressed for bed in pick flannel pajamas. I said that he tried to get back together, said Riley. She peered through the open door to see Ryan playing with Trissy's children in the living room. Motherfucker, Scott hissed over the phone. Right, Riley said. He was spewing all that fated mate's bullshit that he loves so much. I told you that it was imprinting. Yeah. Maybe. Riley sighed. I feel like such an idiot. Don't blame yourself. You're not the first woman who's been tricked by a crazy ex. He's not crazy. He's just. Riley searched for the right word to describe Elijah. He reminded her of a spoiled puppy refusing to let go of a toy. Persistent, Riley said. He has all these ideas in his head and he doesn't understand why I don't think the same. Sounds like he's in pretty deep. He's surrounded by assholes who think they're part of some master race. Riley pulled back the curtain to peer out the window. It's impossible to get through to him. Maybe I should come over, said Scott. No, it's okay. Elijah's an entitled prick, but I can't imagine him doing anything extreme. Are you sure? Yeah. I'm just worried about him showing up here or work. There was something about Elijah's face that hinted that he wouldn't take no for an answer. I'll drop by tomorrow, said Scott. Jacob won't stop talking about his Lego ship anyway. Are you sure? What about Abigail? She'll be fine. Her hormones are starting to balance out more. She was talking today about heading back home in another week or so. That's good. So I'll have plenty of time to be your knight in shining armor. You wish, Riley scoffed. I'll see you in the morning. Okay. Thanks for everything, Scott. Don't worry about it. Just take care of yourself. Will do. Night, Riley. Night, Scott. Riley hung up the call and collapsed back onto the bed. She scrolled through her phone, checking the news and weather for the 4th time that evening. She was tempted to look Elijah up on social media, but then decided against it. Seeing his face would only make her think ridiculous things. Why did she bring this clusterfuck down on herself? The pounding of small footsteps echoed up the hallway towards her. Riley looked up to see Ryan enthusiastically waving a crayon drawing in her face. Hey, Riley said with a smile. What do you have there? Ryan passed her the drawing. It was a large pink circle with yellow hair, standing next to a large blob that she assumed was a car. Oh, said Riley anxiously, hoping that it wasn't what it looked like. Is that Daddy? Ryan enthusiastically nodded. Oh wow. Riley internally swore. It's great. Ryan made a long string of hand gestures that Riley found hard to understand. He jabbed one finger towards her phone, then pointed to his picture. Well, Daddy is a very busy man, said Riley, but the look of disappointment on Ryan's face was almost enough to break her. But I'm sure that we'll see him again sometime. Hopefully when he stops being a fucking weirdo, Riley didn't dare say out loud. How about you go brush your teeth, said Riley. It's bedtime soon. Ryan shook his head and dashed back down the hall. He crawled under the sofa in a poor attempt to hide. Riley sighed and got to her feet. After an hour of struggling to make Ryan brush his teeth and put on his pajamas, Riley finally managed to wrangle Ryan into his own bed. Riley lay down beside him as she read a bright picture book. Good night, Bunny, Riley said while pointing to the cartoonish pictures. Good night, toothbrush. Good night, grass. Ryan ripped the book out of her hand and began to flip through the pages on his own. Riley yawned and turned off the light. She pretended to be asleep until Ryan dozed off beside her. There were still things that she needed to do, but Riley was too tired to move. She pulled a blanket over her shoulders and drifted off to sleep. Riley felt her body rock back and forth as she was carried through darkness. She could hear the rustling of wind through the trees and dried grass crunching under large shoes. The cold night air chilled her skin. Riley shivered. Strong arms pulled her closer. A warm chest pressed against her cheek. She knew that smell. Elijah, Riley whispered. It's okay. His deep voice rumbled down to her core. Just go back to sleep. Her body felt light and fuzzy. Was this real or just another dream? What are you doing? She mumbled. Riley cracked open her eyes to see the starry sky above them as Elijah carried her through an overgrown field. I'll show you, he said with conviction. I'll show you everything. The gentle swaying of her body in Elijah's arms slowly lured Riley back into unconsciousness. It was okay. Elijah couldn't really be there. When she woke up, everything would be back to normal.